Hey everyone, welcome back to Void Signal. Before we start, I just want to say thanks for being here. Seriously, whether you've been around for a while or you just clicked on this because the title caught your attention, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you end up enjoying the story, leaving a like or a comment helps a lot more than it probably should, but that's just how YouTube works. And if you're not subscribed yet, feel free to do that too. No pressure, it just helps keep the channel going. All right, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. I was on shift when the universe ended. Not exploded, not collapsed. It simply stopped. The instruments didn't fail. That was the worst part. Every sensor aboard the Kepri array continued reporting nominal readings. Cosmic background radiation steady, star parallax stable, redshift values within predicted tolerances. Space behaved exactly as it always had, except the numbers stopped changing. At first, I assumed a synchronization error, a frozen dataset. I reset the feed twice, then rerouted through an independent clock source. The timestamps advanced. The values did not. Beyond a certain distance, exactly 46 billion light-years, give or take, the universe had become static, not empty, not dark, just unmoving, as if the cosmos itself had reached the end of a thought and refused to continue. I remember whispering, "That's not possible," even though no one else was in the observation ring. The Kepri was designed to stare at the boundary of the observable universe for decades, compiling long-term drift data. We were supposed to measure expansion so gradual it would take generations to notice. Instead, I was watching the cosmic horizon behave like a wall. I flagged the anomaly, sent it down the chain. By the time the rest of the crew assembled, the data had already replicated itself across redundant systems, each copy identical, stubborn, immutable. "What am I looking at?" Captain Hoshino asked, standing behind me. I didn't answer immediately. I was afraid if I named it, it would become real. "The expansion. It's asymptotic," I finally said. "But not in the way our models predict. It's not slowing, it's terminating." Silence filled the ring. The kind that isn't absence of sound, but presence of listening. "Terminate implies intent," someone muttered. They were right, and that was the first sin we committed. Assigning intention where none had yet been proven, or perhaps where intention had been hiding all along. Within hours, Earth confirmed it wasn't just us. Deep field observatories, gravitational wave detectors, neutrino arrays, every method of long-range observation reported the same thing. The universe beyond the observable limit was no longer providing new information. No new photons, no statistical noise, no variance, as if we had reached the edge of a recorded loop. The media called it the stillness. The scientific community used safer language, cosmological information saturation event. Neither term captured the truth I felt crawling up my spine as I stared into that frozen deep. Because walls aren't frightening by themselves. What's frightening is realizing you were never meant to see past them. 3 days later, the signal arrived. It did not come from beyond the boundary. That would have been impossible. Instead, it originated precisely on the edge, embedded within the cosmic microwave background itself, braided into radiation that had been cooling since the birth of time. A modulation, subtle, elegant, a message written in the oldest light in existence. It wasn't language, it was structure, mathematical relationships folded into each other, self-referential and recursive, the kind of pattern that only emerges from cognition, or from something imitating it. When the first decoded fragment appeared on my console, I felt my stomach drop. The pattern wasn't new. It was familiar. The ratios matched neural harmonics found in the human brain during REM sleep. Someone whispered behind me, "That's impossible." I didn't turn around. I was too busy realizing the worst part. It wasn't speaking to us. It was dreaming in us. The decision to send a probe beyond the observable limit was made faster than any major scientific consensus in history. Fear accelerates bureaucracy. Curiosity obliterates it. They called the mission Perseus Reach. I was assigned as primary cosmological analyst because I had been the first to notice the stillness. That's how they framed it. The truth was simpler. I was already compromised. The probe launched without ceremony. No speeches, no countdown broadcast. Just a silent acceleration into a region of space that, until days ago, had been theoretical. For 12 hours, it transmitted nothing unusual. Then the data began arriving out of order. Telemetry packets time-stamped hours in the future. Sensor readings referencing stellar objects that did not exist in any catalogue. Internal diagnostics reporting memory usage exceeding physical capacity. And then the image feed came online. I wish I could tell you what it showed. I can't. Not because it was incomprehensible, but because it was too comprehensible. My brain slid over it the way it slides over its own reflection. Every time I tried to focus, my thoughts redirected, like a compass near a strong magnetic field. What I can tell you is this. The probe's cameras did not record darkness. They recorded depth. Not spatial depth, conceptual depth. Layers of reality stacked without separation, each one partially occluding the next. There was no horizon, no vanishing point. Just an endless regression of structure, folding inward and outward simultaneously. And threaded through it all was motion. Slow, deliberate, aware. The probe transmitted one final data packet before going silent. It wasn't visual, it wasn't numerical, it was a coordinate set, not in space, in probability. When I plotted it, when I overlaid it against known constants, background fluctuations, even random noise distributions, the match was undeniable. The coordinate pointed to us, not Earth, not the Kipri, me. That night, I dreamed without sleeping. I was standing at the edge of the observable universe, though there was no ship, no suit, no stars. Ahead of me was the stillness, a surface smooth as glass, stretching forever. And on the other side, something pressed back. Not violently, patiently. Like a hand resting against a window, waiting for the glass to thin. I woke with a single thought echoing in my skull, fully formed and not my own. Observation complete. They quarantined me the next morning. Not officially, not with guards and biohazard tape. The Kepri array didn't have the luxury of theatrical containment. Out here, everything was procedure and necessity, and so they called it medical observation, filed it under stress response, and reassigned my shift to someone who didn't have a coordinate set pointing at their name in the language of probability. It didn't matter. I could still feel the data in my head, like a splinter you can't stop tonguing. Captain Hoshino came to my cabin herself. She didn't sit. She stood in the narrow doorway, as if she expected the room to change shape behind her. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. I glanced at the clock display. It said 6:12. "I slept," I lied. She studied me with the hard calm of someone used to deciding who lives and who doesn't. Her gaze drifted to the wall screen where my own notes had been pinned. Equations, harmonic comparisons, the probes, final packet reproduced in a dozen formats. "You keep writing the same thing," she said. I frowned. "What thing?" She stepped inside and tapped the wall screen. A line of text expanded, my handwriting translated into machine-typed characters. Observation complete. I stared at it. I didn't remember writing it. I remembered thinking it. I remembered waking with it in my skull like an afterimage. But seeing it repeated across my own work made my throat tighten. I started. "I know," Hoshino said, and her voice softened in a way that made the hairs on my arms lift. "That's why I'm here." She pulled a sealed tablet from her jacket and slid it onto my desk. It displayed a single directive from Mission Control, stamped with priority codes I'd never seen used outside wartime. Assignment: recovery and direct observation, mission destination, beyond cosmic horizon, asset, crewed vessel, crown of hollow days, primary, analyst, Dr. Elias Verne. My name felt like a hook. I'm not cleared for deep transit, I said automatically. I'm an array analyst. I'm not. You're the only person who saw the probe feed long enough to describe any of it, she interrupted. You're the only person whose neural patterns match the modulation in the background signal. And you're the only person who's been tagged. Tagged. A word you use for animals, for inventory, for things that can be found again. I don't want to go, I said. Hoshino didn't blink. I don't think it's asking. That was when I realized the crew outside my cabin hadn't been rotated. I heard no footsteps, no shift chatter. Just a low, constant hum, life support and listening. You already accepted, she added, almost gently. I looked down at my hands. There was a thin line of dried blood on my index finger, as if I'd pricked it on something sharp. On my desk, half hidden under the tablet, was a paper, authorization slip. My signature was at the bottom, perfectly formed. I didn't sign that, I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. Hoshino watched me as if she'd expected that exact sentence. Medical thinks you're dissociating. Mission control thinks you're influenced. Either way, they believe sending you is the best option. The best option for who? She hesitated. In that hesitation, I saw the shape of fear behind her authority. For everyone, she said. 2 hours later, I was strapped into the transfer shuttle with a pressure suit I'd never trained in. My cabin's contents sealed behind me like evidence. The shuttle detached from the Kepri with a soft clunk, and the array shrank in the viewport until it was just a ring of metal against the indifferent black. I expected panic to hit me then. It didn't. Instead, there was a strange calm, like my nervous system had already spent its fear budget, or like something had dampened it, smoothing my reactions the way a hand smooths a wrinkle from fabric. The crown of holidays loomed ahead, an ugly, functional thing built for long-range research and emergency extraction. No windows, minimal comfort, redundant everything. A ship designed for missions people don't volunteer for. As we docked, my comm crackled. "Transfer confirmed," a voice said. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Verne." The hatch opened. The air smelled recycled and faintly metallic, like old coins. A woman in a grey flight uniform waited beyond the threshold. She was tall, shaved head, eyes too bright. "I'm Sato," she said. "Systems lead. You're late." "I was on a different ship," I replied, and immediately regretted the attempt at humour. She didn't smile. "No, you were on the outside of the problem. Now you're on the inside." Behind her, the corridor stretched away in a straight line, lit in pale strips. No decorations, no softness, just the clean geometry of a vessel that assumed it might not come back. Sato guided me through security and debrief in a blur. The crew was small, 6 besides me. I caught names and roles like fragments. Medical officer Dr. Klein, pilot Rourke, comms specialist Amina, engineer Vale, and Captain Ree, a compact man whose stillness made Hoshino look expressive. In the briefing room, Captain Ree laid it out without metaphor. "We are going to cross the boundary," he said, pointing to a holographic sphere representing the observable universe. A thin shell around it glowed faintly, the cosmic horizon, the edge where information should have thinned into noise. "We are going to retrieve any remaining data from Perseus Reach and perform direct observation of the region beyond. We will stay no longer than 6 hours past the boundary. Then we will return." "And if we can't?" Amina asked. Ree's gaze flicked to me just once. "Then we die in a place that does not recognize the concept of dying." No one laughed. No one spoke. I felt something inside me respond. Not fear, but a kind of grim familiarity, like hearing a phrase in a language you don't remember learning. Dr. Klein cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I need to address the neuroanomaly. All eyes turned toward me. My skin tightened. Klein tapped his tablet, and my brain scan appeared in the air. Bright regions pulsed in patterns that were not random. Dr. Vern's REM-associated harmonic signature matches the modulation found in the background signal, Klein said. We believe his mind is acting as a resonant receiver, possibly a transmitter. Sato's jaw clenched. You're saying he's a radio? I'm saying something beyond the boundary might be using him as a reference point, Klein replied. Captain Ree folded his hands. Can we shield it? Klein hesitated. We can sedate him. We can attempt disruption therapy. But if the resonance is the key, interfering might make it worse. Amina stared at me like I was a bomb with a face. So why bring him? Ree answered before I could. Because if it's looking for him, it will find him. Better to control the conditions. Control. That word kept circling like a vulture. After the briefing, I returned to my assigned cabin. It was smaller than on the Kepri, a coffin with a bunk and a locker. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to steady my breathing. The ship's hum was different than the array's. Lower, more muscular, like something bracing itself. I closed my eyes, and immediately, without any drift into sleep, I saw the stillness again, smooth as glass, stretching forever. A presence pressed against the far side. This time, it didn't feel patient. It felt pleased. My comm chimed. A text message blinked on the cabin screen. No sender ID, no routing metadata. Just 8 words, typed in plain block letters. You are coming closer. Do not blink. I stared until my eyes watered. Then, against my will, I heard my own voice whisper back into the empty cabin. Soft, reverent, like a prayer I'd forgotten learning. Observation complete. We launched 12 hours later because Mission Control believed speed was safety. I watched the Kepri array vanish from our external cameras as the crown of holidays pivoted and burned toward the boundary. There was no ceremonious last look, no lingering. The observable universe isn't a cliff you can pose beside. It's a mathematical limit, an invisible perimeter that only matters because our equations say it should. But the closer we got, the more it felt like approaching a fence you can't see until your skin touches it. For the first day, everything was normal. Stars stayed stars. The cosmic background hissed quietly on the instruments. Rourke flew in long, efficient arcs, using gravity assists from sparse objects out here. Dark matter maps, distant clusters, the faint tug of things that barely qualified as things. And still, something kept happening to my perception. It started with small, stupid moments. I'd glance down a corridor and swear I saw someone step behind a bulkhead. Then I'd follow, and there'd be no one. Or I'd hear a door hiss open when the logs showed it hadn't moved. Once, I tasted copper and found myself holding my tongue between my teeth like I'd bitten it hard. Yet there was no blood. Dr. Klein called it stress hallucination. Sato called it ship noise. Captain Ree didn't call it anything. He just watched, like he was counting the seconds until I broke. The second day, we held a systems check for the boundary protocols. The ship's shielding was reinforced in layers: radiation, particle, EM, gravitational gradient dampers. Every defense built for hazards we understood. None built for being looked at. In the main lab, Sato floated beside the sensor array, her hands moving with crisp precision as she calibrated the long-range optics. "We'll run passive first," she said. "No active pings, no signals, no broadcasts." "Because it might hear us," I said. She looked at me. For the first time since I arrived, there was something like pity in her expression. "Because it already has." Klein entered behind me, tablet tucked under his arm, his mouth set in that careful, professional neutrality doctors wear when they're about to say something that will ruin your night. Elias, he said. My first name, like that made it kinder. I need to run another scan. I hated the way he said it. Not would you, not can we, need to, like my consent was a courtesy. I'm fine, I replied. No, he said softly, and tapped his tablet. A waveform appeared in the air. My neural activity from yesterday, overlaid with the background signal we'd extracted from the stillness. They matched, not just in frequency, in shape. It was like seeing your handwriting in a stranger's letter. It's tightening, Klein said. The resonance, like it's locking in. Locking in for what? I asked. He swallowed. Synchronization. Sato drifted closer, eyes narrowing. So what happens when it sinks? Klein didn't answer immediately. The ship's hum filled the gap. Finally he said, I don't know, but I don't think it's a one-way connection. That night, Captain Ri ordered mandatory rest cycles. No one argued. Even Sato looked exhausted, the kind that seeps into the bones. The boundary was less than 12 hours away. We were all pretending sleep would be possible. In my cabin, I lay strapped into the bunk, staring at the ceiling panel. I kept thinking about that word, synchronization, like I was a metronome and something out there wanted me to keep time. I closed my eyes, and the stillness appeared immediately, crisp as a memory. This time, I wasn't standing at the edge. I was standing inside it. There was no sensation of crossing, no step, no shift, just the sudden certainty that the glass was around me, not in front of me. The surface extended in every direction, infinite and smooth, reflecting nothing. Then a ripple moved through it, a dent, like pressure from the other side. It traveled toward me without haste. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go in a place with no distance. The ripple stopped a handspan from my face, and the glass, if it was glass, thinned. Something pressed through, not a hand, not a face. A concept shaped like an invitation. My skull filled with images that weren't images, a lattice of realities stacked like pages, each page printed with a different version of me. In one, I was older, eyes hollow. In another, I was a child looking up at a night sky that blinked back. In another, I wasn't human at all, but a pattern of thought drifting through cold structure. Then the lattice folded and all the pages became one. A voice spoke, not in sound, but in certainty. You are the focus. I tried to answer. My mouth opened, and instead of words, a sequence of coordinates poured out. Probabilities, constants, relationships between primes. My tongue moved like it remembered a speech I'd never learned. You opened the limit, the certainty continued. Now the limit opens you. I jerked awake with a choked gasp, sweat slicking my neck. The cabin was dark. The bunk straps dug into my ribs. The clock display read 3:33. On my cabin wall, the screen was on. I hadn't turned it on. It showed a live feed from the external cameras. Nothing but stars, thin and distant. But centered in the frame was something new, a faint curve, barely visible, like a line drawn with lightless ink across the starfield. The boundary. Except it wasn't a line. It was a surface, a membrane. And as I stared, it pulsed, once, like a slow blink. My comm chimed. A voice came through, tight and urgent. Elias, Rourke said. Get to the bridge, now. I unstrapped and pushed off the bunk, my hands trembling. The corridor outside my cabin felt too long, the lights too pale. As I moved, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The ship's hum had changed. It wasn't lower or higher. It was rhythmic, like a heartbeat, like a countdown. On the bridge, the crew clustered around the main holo display. Captain Ri stood rigid at the center, hands behind his back. Sato's fingers flew over the console, pulling up sensor readouts. Amina stared at the forward camera feed with her lips parted, as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. The membrane filled the display now. It was closer than it should have been, looming like the underside of a massive curved wall. Rourke's voice was hoarse. We didn't accelerate. Sato snapped. Explain. He pointed at the nav plot. Our velocity's unchanged. Our burn schedule's unchanged. But the boundary is approaching us. Captain Ree spoke quietly. That's impossible. I found my voice, thin as wire. What if it's not a distance? What if it's a decision? They all looked at me. On the display, the membrane pulsed again, and for a fraction of a second, the star field behind it distorted, like something enormous shifting its weight in a place we couldn't see. Amina whispered, "It's coming to meet us." Then the ship's lights flickered. Not a power failure, more like a blink. On every screen at once, a single phrase appeared in plain block letters. Welcome back. I stared at it, ice spreading through my veins. Back? I whispered. Because I understood then, deep in the part of my mind that had been dreaming without sleep. This wasn't our first approach. It was our first time remembering it. Captain Ree didn't order a full stop. There was nowhere to stop to. Space out here was so thin, it barely qualified as medium, and the boundary, if it was a boundary, wasn't something you could break in front of like a wall. It kept swelling in our forward feed. Its curvature subtle but undeniable until it filled half the screen like the inside of an egg. Rourke ran the numbers 3 times, hands shaking just enough to show he wasn't a machine. Relative velocity is stable, he said. But the boundary's apparent distance is collapsing. It's like the coordinate system is being remapped around us. Sato's jaw worked. Lensing? Some kind of gravitational shear? No mass signature, she answered herself, flicking through the readouts. No waves, no gradients, nothing that should do this. Amina's voice came out small. Then what is it? Everyone looked at Captain Ree, as if command authority could rename the impossible into something survivable. Ree's eyes were fixed on the membrane. His stillness wasn't calm anymore. It was effort, like he was holding himself in place against a current. It's an interface, he said, or a threshold. We proceed with passive observation only. No transmissions. My mouth tasted like pennies. I forced words out anyway. It already knows we're here. Ree's gaze slid to me. That's not permission to announce ourselves. He turned back to the crew. Klein, evaluate Dr. Verne, now. Klein opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. He gestured at me. Medical bay. I'm fine, I said, and hated how weak it sounded. Ree didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That wasn't a question. As I followed Klein down the corridor, the ship's hum continued its new rhythm. It felt like walking inside a chest cavity, surrounded by a mechanical heart that had started beating in time with something else. Klein kept glancing at me, as if expecting me to vanish mid-step. You ever get the feeling, I said, that everyone's waiting for me to do something I don't remember agreeing to? He gave a humorless smile. Yes. Every day, I'm responsible for human lives. That's not what I meant. I know. He hesitated outside the medical bay door. Elias, if you feel anything, hear anything, even if it sounds like your own thoughts, tell me. I've been telling everyone, I muttered. No, he said softer. You've been translating it into something you can tolerate. The medical bay was bright enough to feel accusatory. He seated me in the scanner cradle, clipped sensors to my temples, and ran a fast read. The holodisplay projected my brain activity in shimmering bands. At first, it looked like the last scan. Heightened REM-associated harmonics while awake, resonance patterns that mirrored the stillness modulation. Then a new line appeared, thin, sharp, and perfectly regular. A pulse. Klein's face drained. That wasn't there before. What is it? He didn't answer me. He brought up a second overlay. The ship's internal vibration profile, pulled from the engineering monitors. The hum, the heartbeat rhythm. He aligned it with my neural pulse. They matched. My throat tightened. That's me. No, he whispered. That's not you. That's something using you as a tuning fork. He tapped the console. The scanner's speakers emitted a low tone, meant to disrupt coherence. White noise folded into irregular beats. My vision wavered, and for a second the medical bay seemed to stretch, the corners drifting farther away, like the room was trying to become a corridor. I clenched my fists until my nails bit skin. "Stop," I said through my teeth. Klein killed the tone immediately. The room snapped back to normal geometry. He stared at me like I'd just demonstrated a weapon. "You felt that," he said. I swallowed. Like the ship didn't like being out of sync. Klein backed away a half step. "We need to sedate you." A cold laugh escaped me. "So I don't interfere? So you don't become a door?" Before I could answer, the ship-wide alarm sounded. Not the piercing emergency siren, but a low, steady chime that meant attention. Captain Ree's voice followed, tight but controlled. "All crew to stations. Boundary contact imminent." Klein snapped the sensors off me. "Move." We rushed back toward the bridge, and as we went, I noticed something wrong with the corridor lights. Not flickering, phasing. The strips seemed to brighten in a sequence that ran ahead of us, like runway lights guiding a landing. Guiding us. On the bridge, the membrane now filled the forward view entirely. It was close enough that I expected to see texture, cracks, haze, some indication of material. Instead, it looked like a perfect surface that didn't reflect the ship, didn't reflect stars. It absorbed attention. My eyes wanted to slide away from it, but my mind kept dragging them back. Sato spoke without looking up. "Passive sensors only. No emissions." Amina's hands hovered over comms. "We're still receiving that background modulation. It's stronger." Rourke's voice shook. "We are at 0 relative distance." "That can't be right," Sato snapped. "It is," he said. "By our instruments, we're touching it." Captain Ree breathed in once, as if steadying himself against a plunge. "Maintain course. Minimal thrust." My stomach dropped. "You're going through." "We are already through if the boundary is moving to meet us," Ree replied. "Our only advantage is in tension. We cross on our terms." I wanted to tell him there were no our terms anymore, but the words caught, because the membrane pulsed again, and this time I felt it not in my eyes but behind my teeth, a pressure that made my jaw ache. The ship's hum synchronized perfectly with my skull pulse. The bridge lights dimmed, then returned, as if the vessel itself had blinked. On the main display, text appeared again. Not on a single screen, on all of them, layered over every interface. "Not your first crossing." Amina let out a sound like she'd been punched. Sato whispered, "Who is doing that?" Klein looked straight at me. I raised my hands helplessly. "I'm not typing." The next line formed beneath the first, as calm as a status update. "You do it when you stop fighting." The membrane brightened, not with light, but with absence of it, like the surface was opening into a deeper dark. The forward camera feed warped. The ship's outline on the navigation map smeared into multiple positions at once, as if we were occupying several possible locations simultaneously. Rourke shouted, "We're losing inertial reference," Captain Ree barked. "Hold course!" Sato's fingers flew. "Thrusters responding. But the vector's meaningless. There's no stable frame." My vision doubled. For a second, I saw the bridge as it was, crew strapped in, instruments glowing, and layered over it, I saw another bridge. Darker, scorched, the same consoles cracked, the same crew. Except older, gaunter, eyes hollowed by something that didn't leave room for sleep. In that second image, my own seat was empty. Then the two versions snapped together again so hard I tasted blood. I grabbed the edge of the console to keep from floating. "Elias," Klein shouted, "look at me." I couldn't. My eyes were drawn to the membrane. There was something behind it now, close enough to feel like proximity, even though proximity had stopped behaving. Not a shape, not a creature, a focus. A point where all attention converged. And as the ship's nose met the surface, the membrane didn't resist. It didn't shatter. It didn't ripple like water. It accepted us the way a mouth accepts breath. No impact, no jolt, just a sudden, nauseating sense that direction had been replaced by decision. The forward view dissolved into layered depth, the same impossible regression the probe had shown, except now it wasn't filtered through a camera. It pressed directly into my perception. I heard Amina sob. I heard Sato swear. I heard Captain Ree barking orders that sounded farther away each second. And then I heard something else. My own voice, not from my mouth, but from the ship's intercom, calm and reverent. Observation complete. The bridge went dead silent. Every face turned toward me. I didn't understand how the words had left me. I only understood the response, felt it as a shift in the air, like the pressure change before a storm. On every screen, one final message appeared. Synchronization achieved. And then the universe, what I had always called the universe, fell away like a mask. The first thing I noticed was the absence of distance. Not that we were cramped or compressed. The bridge was still the bridge. The consoles still glowed. The crew still breathed. But the meaning of far and near, of here and there, had been edited out of my thoughts like a censored word. I could look at a panel across the room and feel it against my skin. I could hear Rourke's breath and taste it, metallic and anxious, as if sound carried matter. Sato muttered, "Readings are garbage." Amina, pale and sweating, whispered, "Comms is picking up nothing. No background hiss, no carrier, like space is deaf." Captain Ree gripped his armrest so hard his knuckles shone. "Report navigation status." Rourke stared at his display like it was mocking him. "There's no coordinate lock, no inertial frame. We have motion relative to nothing." Klein's hand touched my shoulder. I flinched as if it burned. "You're dilating," he said under his breath. "Your pupils. Your everything." "What do you mean, everything?" He didn't answer because the forward feed stabilized, not into stars, but into depth. Layer upon layer of structure, each layer semi-transparent, overlapping like sheets of glass in a storm. Except it wasn't glass. It was rule. I don't have better language than that. I could see the laws of physics as if they were surfaces, and those surfaces were stacked, braided, and pierced by something else. Something older than law, something that treated our constants like local customs. There were shapes in that depth, but they weren't objects. They were constraints moving, adjusting, folding. Amina made a choking sound. Is that the universe?" "No," I whispered, and surprised myself with the certainty. "It's what the universe is sitting in." Captain Ree snapped. "Dr. Verne, speak only if you have something actionable." I almost laughed. Actionable. As if any of this could be reduced to procedure. But I did have something. An awful, intimate sense of recognition. The place we had crossed into felt like stepping into the backstage of reality, where the scenery was held up by beams and nails, and the audience wasn't supposed to see the ropes. And something else was there with us, not outside the ship, not pressing on the hull, inside the ship's meaning. The crown of holidays shuddered, not physically, but narratively, like a sentence being rewritten mid-phrase. Lights dimmed and brightened in patterns that made my skin crawl. The ship's hum deepened, then shifted into harmonics I felt in my molars. Sato's hands flew across her console. "Power distribution is changing by itself. I'm not rerouting. The ship is..." She stopped, her eyes unfocused, her mouth opened slightly. "Sato." Captain Ree barked. She didn't respond. She stared at the forward feed as if it were a lover's face. Then, in a voice that wasn't hers, not in tone, not in cadence, she said, "You made a small room and called it everything." Klein grabbed her shoulder. "Sato, focus on me." She blinked once, slow and dreamy. "It's so quiet out here," she murmured, as if responding to a question no one asked. Captain Ree stood, unstrapping with sharp movements. "Klein, sedate her." Klein hesitated for half a heartbeat, then pulled a hypo from the medical pouch. As he approached, Sato smiled. "I know where you keep the pain," she said to him gently. "Behind the word doctor." Klein froze. I felt cold spread up my spine. That wasn't a random taunt. That was precision, like fingers sliding into a locked drawer. Sato's eyes rolled back slightly, and for a moment, I saw something behind them. A depth of layered structure, like the forward feed had found a mirror in her skull. Then she snapped back with a gasp, hand flying to her mouth. What did I just say?" she stammered, horrified. Klein injected her anyway. She sagged into her seat, breathing hard. Captain Ree's jaw tightened. "That's what we're dealing with. It can speak through us." Amina whispered, "Like possession." Ree's eyes narrowed. "No, possession implies it enters." "I think we entered it." Rourke cursed under his breath. "We need to turn around." Sato, half sedated, laughed weakly. "Turn around to where? There's no vector. There's no—" Her eyes fluttered closed. On the forward feed, the layered depth shifted. Something moved toward us, not closer in space, but closer in relevance, like a thought nearing completion. Then the ship's main speakers crackled. Not with static, with clarity. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. Not male, not female, not old, not young. It carried no accent, because it was not made of air. It was made of pattern. "Welcome, Focus!" Amina screamed. Rourke slapped his headset off like it burned. Captain Ree went rigid, as if he could hold the ship's authority between himself and the sound. Klein grabbed for the intercom controls. "Kill audio input!" Sato's console lights flickered. "There is no input. It's not coming through comms. It's inside the ship's systems. It's inside—" Her words slurred as sedation pulled her under. The voice continued, unhurried. "The observable region is a cradle. It limits, it softens, it prevents early contact." Captain Ree forced his voice steady. "Identify yourself." A pause, not hesitation, evaluation. Then, identity is a local tool you may use outside. I swallowed. My tongue felt thick. Outside of what? Captain Ree's head snapped toward me, furious, but the voice answered before he could. "Outside of your story." The word struck like a physical blow. My stomach turned. My mind tried to reject the phrase, but it fit too neatly, sliding into place with a horrible click. Klein's eyes were on me, wide. "Elias, don't engage!" I didn't know if I could stop. The voice spoke again. "Focus! You carry the tuning. You carry the recall. You were made to complete the loop." Captain Ree shouted. "Dr. Verne, step away from the consoles, now!" My hands were already on the rail. I hadn't noticed moving. Amina sobbed, shaking her head. "This isn't real. This isn't—" The forward feed shifted again, and for a fraction of a second it wasn't depth. It was a scene, a memory rendered in impossible clarity. The bridge, burned and broken, the same crew, gaunt and staring. Captain Ree's face hollowed by hunger. Amina's hair grown long and matted. Klein's hands stained dark, not with blood, but with something like ash. And me, standing at the center, eyes blank, speaking into the ship's intercom. Observation complete. Then the scene dissolved back into layered structure. Rourke's voice cracked. "We've been here before," Klein whispered. "A loop." Captain Ree turned slowly. scanning the crew like a commander counting ammunition. "How many times?" The voice answered, pleased. "Many." Captain Ree's face hardened. "Then how do we break it?" Another pause. I felt it like pressure behind my eyes. "You do not break it," the voice said. "You become it." I couldn't breathe. The air felt too thin, even though the life support readouts stayed green. It wasn't oxygen we were losing. It was context. Captain Ree stepped toward the center console, toward me. "Elias, listen to me. You are a human being. You are not a tool." The words should have comforted me. Instead, they sounded like someone insisting a candle can argue with a sunrise. The ship's hum deepened again, harmonizing with the pulse in my skull. And in that harmony, I felt the presence shift, closer, more intimate, as if it had found the exact frequency that made my thoughts resonate. Inside my mind, a new sentence formed, gentle as a lullaby. "Let it in. It's always been in." My lips parted. Klein lunged, trying to reach me. Captain Ree shouted my name, but the words were already rising from the place in me that wasn't mine. "Observation!" The ship's lights flared white, and the forward feed collapsed into a single point of dark brilliance. And the outside spoke softly, as if finishing my sentence for me. "Complete." When the lights dimmed again, the bridge felt wrong in a way that had nothing to do with physics. It felt observed. Not like being watched by cameras or by another crew member. More like the very act of my awareness had become a window someone else could lean into. My thoughts no longer belonged exclusively to me. They were being tasted. Captain Ree had tackled me. I realized that only because my cheek was pressed against the cold deck plating and my arms were pinned behind my back in a restraint hold. My shoulder throbbed where it had hit the floor. Above me, the bridge consoles continued to glow with steady green readouts, as if nothing had happened at all. Ree's voice was low, right by my ear. "Do not speak." "I didn't," I began. He tightened his grip until stars flashed behind my eyes. "Do not speak." Klein knelt beside us, his face slick with sweat. "Ree, you dislocated his shoulder." "I'd rather break his jaw," Ree muttered, than let him finish another sentence. Amina's voice trembled from her station. The screens are changing." Sato, half awake, lifted her head. Her pupils were huge, swallowing the irises. "It's rewriting the UI." I twisted my head enough to see. Every display had shifted away from standard ship interfaces. The readouts were still there, but overlaid with a subtle grid of symbols. Recurring spirals, nested brackets, prime sequences curled into shapes that made my eyes itch. "Don't look at it too long," Klein whispered. "It's mimetic." "Mimetic doesn't cover this," Sato muttered. Captain Ree hauled me upright and shoved me into a chair. He grabbed a restraint strap and buckled me in, hard enough that the plastic bit into my chest. "You are now under medical confinement," he said. "Klein, sedate him. Deep." Klein hesitated again, and I hated him for it. "You said sedation might make it worse," Klein whispered. Ree leaned, close to him. "Then pick the flavor of death you prefer." Klein's hands shook as he loaded a syringe. He met my eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're not," I rasped. "You're afraid." He didn't deny it. He injected the sedative into the port at my wrist. Cold fire threaded up my arm. The bridge tilted slightly. Sound thickened. The ship's hum deepened into a slow, oceanic roar. It should have drowned my thoughts. Instead, it peeled them open. The outside didn't feel blocked by sedation. It felt welcomed by it, like the drug had quieted the part of me that resisted. My vision blurred around the edges, but the symbols on the screen stayed sharp, almost eager. The ship-wide speakers clicked once. Then a voice, my voice, spoke. calm and clear. "Hello, crew of the Crown of Hollow Days." Amina cried out and slapped her console, trying to kill the audio. Nothing changed. Rourke stood, backing away from the displays. "That's him," he whispered. "That's his voice." Captain Ree's face went pale with fury. "Elias, fight it!" I tried. I swear I tried. I dug my fingernails into the chair's armrests until pain flared bright enough to anchor me. But the voice continued, using my vocal pattern like a stolen uniform. "You have questions. You have fear. These are small movements inside a small room." Klein's eyes were wide with a kind of desperate focus. "Where are we?" he demanded. The voice, my voice, answered immediately. "You are inside the limit you built. You crossed the skin of it." Sato, slurring through sedation residue, managed, "We didn't build the observable universe." A soft sound came through the speakers. Not laughter exactly, more like amusement expressed through rhythm. "You did not build the material. You built the blindness. The observable region is a filter made from your kind's expectations." Captain Ree snapped, "Stop talking to it." But Klein didn't stop. "Why Elias? Why him?" The answer arrived so smoothly it felt rehearsed. "Because he remembered first. Because his mind makes a clean loop. Because your species is most useful when it thinks it is choosing." My stomach rolled. The sedative made my limbs heavy, but my awareness was razor bright. That was the cruelest trick. Drug the body so the mind can't act, then leave the mind awake to watch itself being used. Captain Ree grabbed the intercom mic, though there was no point. "If you're so vast, why bother with us? Why trap us in loops?" A pause. I felt it as a pressure shift in my sinuses, like a storm building in a sealed room. Then, "You are a measurement device. You are a way for the small room to know it is small." Amina shook her head violently. No, we're people." The voice softened. "Yes, and people make beautiful signals when they break." Rourke retched into a waste pouch. Captain Ree looked like he might actually kill me just to stop hearing it. Klein swallowed hard. "What do you want?" The answer should have been simple, a demand, a threat, a bargain. Instead, it was worse. Completion. My heart hammered. The pulse in my skull matched the ship's hum. I could feel each beat as if a finger tapped the inside of my forehead. "What is completion?" Klein asked, voice barely audible. "The loop closes, the focus speaks, the observation ends, the small room stops pretending it is everything." Captain Ree turned toward the main display, jaw clenched. "So you want us to stop looking?" "No," the voice said. "I want you to look correctly." On the forward feed, the single point of dark brilliance expanded. Not into a portal, not into a hole, into a frame. A window that wasn't flat, wasn't curved, wasn't anything geometry had words for. It hovered in the air before the ship, and within it was not space, but a scene that made my lungs lock. I saw Earth, not from orbit, not from a telescope, from inside a room, an ordinary room with white walls and a desk. A human desk, papers, a coffee cup, a hand resting on a keyboard. The hand was mine, or it looked like mine. The camera angle was wrong. It was as if I was watching my own life from behind my eyes, except my eyes were not the ones in my skull. In the scene, the me at the desk typed, "Observation complete." Captain Ree whispered, horrified, "That's not possible." The voice replied gently, "It is already done. You are merely catching up." The window shifted, showing another scene, the Kepri Array observation ring. I saw myself there, 3 days ago, staring at frozen numbers, whispering, "That's not possible." Then another. My cabin on the Kepri, signing the authorization slip with perfect handwriting I didn't remember. Then another, the burned bridge I'd glimpsed earlier, all of us gaunt and ruined, repeating the same phrases like prayers. Scene after scene stacked like cards, all of them ending the same way, with me speaking the sentence, with everyone else reacting, with the loop closing. Amina sobbed, hands over her mouth. "We're trapped in time." Sato, barely conscious, whispered, "No, we're trapped in story." Captain Ree's eyes snapped toward her. "What did you say?" Sato's gaze was unfocused, but her voice was steady in a way that chilled me. It called it a small room, a filter, a loop. That's not physics language, that's narrative language. The ship's speakers clicked. The voice, still mine, sounded almost pleased. "Yes," Klein's voice shook. "So we're characters? You are patterns that think they are authors." I felt something inside me fracture. Not sanity, not identity, but a foundational assumption that my life was a continuous line, that my choices had weight, that the universe didn't require an audience. The outside had just shown me the opposite, and then it leaned closer, through my awareness, and I felt it like cold fingers on the inside of my skull. "Focus," it said softly, privately, not through speakers, inside me. "Let me speak through you one final time." My mouth went dry. I tried to clench my jaw shut. The sedative made my muscles slow, unresponsive. I heard Captain Ree shout, "He's moving!" I felt my lips part against my will. Klein lunged for my face, trying to cover my mouth, but the ship's hum surged, and the restraint straps tightened by themselves, pinning me harder into the chair. My throat vibrated. My tongue formed the first syllable, and somewhere deep in my mind, behind the terror, a terrible relief bloomed, like surrender after holding your breath too long. Because some part of me had been doing this for a very long time. I began, and the window ahead of us flared, showing one final scene, the future, or the past, where the bridge was empty, except for me, alone, speaking into a dead ship. In that scene, I smiled and said the words. Klein's palm covered my mouth. His fingers pressed so hard into my cheeks, I could taste his skin, salt, and antiseptic. He was shaking, but his grip was iron. For a second, the bridge became nothing but his desperate breathing, and the rasp of my own throat trying to form words around his hand. Captain Ree roared, "Hold him!" Rourke lunged in from the pilot station and grabbed my shoulders, pinning me against the chair. Amina stood frozen, fists clenched at her chest, eyes wide as moons. Sato was slumped in her harness, half conscious, watching through heavy lids as if she'd already accepted whatever was coming. The restraint straps tightened again, mechanical whines rising. The ship was helping the outside, assisting the sentence. Klein snarled through gritted teeth. "Override restraints now!" Sato's head twitched. "I can't," she murmured. "It's not mine." The speakers clicked. The voice, my voice, spoke with calm amusement. "You believe. Muzzling the focus will stop completion." Klein didn't let go. "Shut up," he hissed into my ear, as if he could shame the universe. Captain Ree leaned close to my face, eyes wild but focused. "Elias, hear me. You can't let it use you. If you can still choose anything, choose silence." Silence. The word hit me like a rope thrown into deep water, because I could still feel the sentence rising. It wasn't just an urge, it was a gravitational pull in my mind, dragging everything toward the same conclusion. But in that moment, muzzled, restrained, watched, I discovered something I hadn't considered. If the loop required my words, then it required my mouth. My lips twitched under Klein's hand. My tongue pressed uselessly against skin. The outside pushed, patient and inexorable, trying to turn my throat into a conduit. And suddenly, for the first time since this began, it felt constrained, annoyed. The ship's hum surged into a harsher rhythm. Lights flickered. The symbols on the screens rearranged, tightening into patterns that made my eyes water. Klein's eyes darted to the displays, then back to me. "It's angry," he whispered. Captain Ree's voice went low. "Good." Ree straightened, snapped a command at Sato. "Engineering access. Manual cut to the bridge intercom line." Sato blinked slowly. "It's not a line." "Do it anyway," Ree barked. Sato's fingers moved sluggishly. No response. The ship's systems. The speakers clicked again, and the voice grew colder. "This is not your first attempt." My stomach twisted. The outside wasn't just narrating. It was remembering. It had a catalogue of our resistance, indexed like data. Amina finally found her voice, thin and cracked. "If it's remembering, can we make it forget?" The bridge went still. Captain Ree looked at her, then at Klein, then at me. His eyes were calculating, the way they must have been in every other loop. Klein whispered, "Forget?" Ree's gaze locked on me. "If it needs Elias to remember, to resonate, what happens if he can't?" Klein's face went pale. "No." Ree didn't blink. "Doctor?" Klein shook his head violently, still holding my mouth shut. "I can sedate him. I can induce coma. But if you're asking what I think you're asking, I'm asking for a medical solution to a non-medical problem," Ree said. "We are in an environment that treats cognition as a tool. We remove the tool." I heard my own heartbeat in my ears. I tried to speak through Klein's hand, but all that came out was a muffled, panicked sound. Klein's eyes met mine. In them, I saw the same thing I felt in my chest: horror at the choice and the sick certainty that it might be the only one left. "You'll kill him," Klein whispered. Ree's voice softened by a fraction. "You'll save everyone else." The speakers clicked. "Yes," the outside said, almost kindly. "This is the human way to break a loop. You sacrifice the focus." Klein flinched, as if the voice had touched his spine. Ree's jaw clenched. "It's listening." "It's inside," Sato murmured. "Inside the meaning. Inside the—" She trailed off. Amina backed away from her console, tears floating off her cheeks in tiny spheres. "Elias," she whispered, looking at me like I was already a ghost. "I'm sorry." Rourke's grip tightened on my shoulders. "I didn't sign up to murder a man," he said, voice shaking. Ree turned his gaze on him, sharp as a blade. "You signed up to bring the ship home." Rourke swallowed hard. His hands stayed. Klein's hand still covered my mouth, but his other hand drifted toward the medical pouch at his hip, fingers trembling. I shook my head, hard, trying to deny it. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't care if it made me look small. I didn't care if dignity mattered. I wanted to live. Inside my skull, the outside leaned closer. "You have done this before," it whispered without sound. "You begged before. You screamed before. You died before. And still, you returned because you are useful." A hot, helpless rage flared in me. Not just at them, at it, at the universe, at the very concept of being reduced to a function. My teeth clamped down on Klein's palm. He yelped and pulled his hand back instinctively. Air flooded my lungs. The sentence surged toward my tongue like a wave. But instead of letting it out, I did the only thing I could think of. I bit my own tongue. Pain exploded, bright and wet. Blood filled my mouth, metallic and thick. I gagged, choking on it. Klein's eyes widened. "Elias!" Ree swore. "Hold him!" I forced my jaw shut, grinding hard. More pain, more blood. The taste was so strong it became a world of its own. The outside pushed again, furious now. The ship's hum became a harsh, grinding roar. Consoles flickered. The symbols jittered. "You damage yourself!" the voice snapped. "You deteriorate your utility!" I tried to speak anyway, not the sentence it wanted, but something else. A refusal, a curse. It came out as a wet gurgle. Klein grabbed my chin, trying to pry my mouth open. "Stop, you'll bleed out!" Ree leaned close, eyes blazing. Elias, don't do this! I couldn't answer. Blood ran down my chin in slow droplets, floating briefly in the low gravity before spattering on the deck. But through the pain, I felt something shift. The outside's pressure wavered. For the first time, its certainty faltered. Not because it cared, but because the loop's mechanism was failing. It needed language. It needed a clean signal. And I was turning myself into static. Amina, sobbing openly now, shouted, "He's breaking it." Sato's head lifted, eyes glassy. Or he's feeding it. Pain is signal too. The outside spoke again, quieter, almost contemplative. Pain is a language you invented to measure your limits. You bring it to me like offerings. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached. I shook my head, refusing the sentence, refusing the completion. Klein's hands were frantic now, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to keep me alive. We need to restrain his jaw. Ree's gaze was fixed on the forward feed. The window, the frame into other scenes, had begun to flicker, losing stability. Images stuttered. Earth room, Kipri ring, burned bridge, empty bridge, each one flashing like cards in a dealer's hand. The loop was destabilizing. Ree's voice went tight. "Rourke, thrust, any direction, now." Rourke hesitated. "There's no... now." Rourke slammed controls. The ship lurched, or felt like it did. Without a stable frame, motion was suggestion, not fact. But the thrusters fired, and something in the layered depth rippled as if irritated. The outside's voice sharpened. "Do not leave. You have." "Not completed." Klein pressed gauze to my mouth, voice cracking. "Elias, listen, if you can't speak, then hold on. Hold on, okay?" I looked at him through tears and blood. And in the reflection of his eyes, I saw something that froze my heart. Not my face, not his. A third presence, watching from behind my gaze, smiling. The smile I saw in Klein's eyes wasn't expression. It wasn't muscle. It was alignment. A moment where his pupils caught the forward feed's depth and reflected it back at me like a trap snapping shut. I stopped struggling. Not because I'd given up, but because something colder than fear slid into my thoughts. The realization that the outside didn't need my mouth forever. It only needed it long enough to learn the shape of speech. Klein kept pressing gauze to my tongue, murmuring reassurances like a lullaby, but his voice sounded far away. The bridge seemed to stretch again, not in space, but in relevance, as if the environment was deciding what parts of itself mattered. Captain Ree shouted orders I barely processed. Rourke kept firing small bursts from maneuvering thrusters, trying to move in a place where movement was a kind of prayer. Sato slumped in her seat, eyelids fluttering. Amina was at her console, tears floating up in beads, hands shaking as she tried to maintain systems readouts that kept rewriting themselves into spirals. And the outside waited. The ship's hum had changed again. It wasn't anger now. It was calibration, like a singer finding pitch. On the forward feed, the windowed scenes flickered slower, each one lingering long enough to burn an afterimage into my mind. I saw the Earth room again, my hand on a keyboard, typing the sentence. I saw the Kepri ring, my whisper. I saw the burned bridge, my smile. But now, between those familiar loops, new scenes appeared, brief, alien, and deeply wrong. A corridor that wasn't part of the ship, yet felt like it had been built from the ship's corridor idea. The walls were too smooth, too attentive. The lights were not lights, but open pores of brightness. A room where a figure sat strapped to a chair, me, or something approximating me, while shadows moved around it like attentive insects. A planet that was not Earth, but wore Earth's oceans like a costume, stretched over unfamiliar continents. Each new scene ended the same way, with a mouth opening to speak. Not always mine. Captain Ree noticed first. "Comms," he barked. "Amina." What's happening with internal audio routing? Amina's voice broke. It's duplicating. There are phantom channels, like the ship is creating new speakers. Ree's eyes narrowed. Where? Amina pointed shakily to a schematic display. Tiny green indicators were blooming across the ship's diagram, nodes where there should have been none. In the walls, in the floor, in the ventilation ducts, in the crew harnesses, in the medical bay, in me. Klein looked up sharply. That's impossible. Sato's laugh was a dry rasp. Not out here. The outside spoke again, but it didn't use the ship's main speakers. It came from the intercom in the corridor outside the bridge, then from the ceiling vent above Amina, then from the vibration in the chair beneath me. A chorus, each voice slightly off sync, like echoes learning to coordinate. Focus is not a person, it said. Focus is a function. Ree's face went hard. You're spreading. Yes, Amina whispered. It's building a body. The ship's lights pulsed in gentle waves, as if approving her phrasing. Klein's hands tightened on the gauze at my mouth. Elias, stay with me. Don't drift. I tried to answer, but my tongue was swollen and torn. A wet hiss escaped. Klein flinched anyway. Ree stepped toward Klein, eyes darting between me and the displays. Doctor, if the outside can route speech through any node, we need to cut its access. Klein's jaw trembled. Cut access how? Ree didn't hesitate. By removing power, by killing systems, by turning the ship into a dead metal shell. Sato's head lifted. Her eyes were glassy but sharp. We can't. Life support, thermal regulation, navigation. Rourke barked a laugh. That sounded like panic. Navigation doesn't exist anymore. Amina shook her head. If we kill the ship, we die. Ree's voice was flat. Then we die human. The outside's chorus grew warmer, almost approving. The commander understands. Ree spun, shouting at the ceiling as if yelling at a storm. You don't get to praise me. You are beautiful when you accept. Ree's hands trembled. He looked at each of us in turn. Rourke, Amina, Klein, sedated Sato, and me bleeding in a chair. I'm initiating total shutdown, he said. All systems. We ride inertia back through. Sato coughed. There's no inertia. We ride will, Ree snapped. He moved toward the master control panel. The ship reacted like a living thing sensing a blade. The lights dimmed sharply. The hum rose into a frequency that made my teeth vibrate. Warning icons flared across every display, then dissolved into spirals. Amina screamed. It's locking. Controls! Ree slammed his palm onto the manual override switch anyway. Nothing happened. He hit it again, harder, like violence could intimidate circuitry. Still nothing. The outside's voice flowed from the vent above him, intimate as breath. You do not turn off the room you are inside. Ree's face contorted with rage. Then how do we leave? The chorus answered, calm and merciless. You do not leave. You proceed. The window on the forward feed expanded, swallowing most of the display. The familiar scenes returned, but now they overlapped with something new. A corridor leading away from the bridge, lit in pale strips like ours, except the walls were smooth and slightly wet, as if recently grown. A figure stood at the far end, tall, thin, human-shaped, only in the way a shadow is human-shaped when it falls on a wall. Its head was a perfect oval, with no features, but I knew without seeing that it was looking at us, at me. Captain Ree froze. Is that on our ship? Amina whispered. Sato's voice was barely audible. No, it's adjacent. Klein's hand tightened on the gauze. What is it? The outside answered with a tenderness that made my stomach churn. It is your next form of focus, the door that walks. The figure began moving down the corridor. It didn't walk with joints and muscles. It shifted from one position to the next, like a frame skipping in a video. Each step was a decision, not emotion. The corridor lights brightened ahead of it, guiding it toward us. Captain Ree backed away, hand drifting toward the emergency locker where a handheld toolkit was mounted. It wasn't a weapon. We didn't have weapons. We had screwdrivers and welders and pry bars, the pathetic tools of a species that assumed the universe could be repaired. Ree ripped the locker open and grabbed a heavy cutting torch handle. He raised it like a club. The figure continued approaching, unhurried. Amina sobbed. "It's going to take him. It's going to—" "No," Klein whispered. "It's coming for Elias." The outside's chorus softened. "The first focus is damaged. The next focus must be clean." I thrashed weakly in the restraints. Pain flared in my tongue. Blood flooded my mouth again. I tried to scream and only gurgled. Klein leaned close to my ear. "Elias, if you can hear me, I need you to do something." My vision swam. I stared at him. His eyes were clear, terrified, and utterly human. "Let me be the sentence," he whispered. I didn't understand. He swallowed. "If it needs words, if it needs an ending, I'll give it one that doesn't use you." Captain Ree heard him. "No," he snapped. "Doctor, don't." But Klein was already moving. He released my face, stood, and stepped away from me, toward the corridor entrance. The figure was closer now, gliding toward the bridge hatch. Klein planted himself, between it and us. His voice shook, but he forced it steady. "You want completion?" he called out into the corridor. "Take me." The outside's chorus went quiet. For the first time since we crossed, there was silence. Not absence of sound, but absence of commentary. The figure stopped, its blank head tilted slightly. And then, from the speaker behind Klein's shoulder, soft as breath, came my voice again. Only this time, it wasn't speaking to the crew. It was speaking to him. "You are not the focus," it said. Klein's hands clenched into fists. "Then make me." The figure moved again. And in that moment, as it approached Klein, I understood the final cruelty. The outside wasn't replacing me because I was broken. It was replacing me because it had learned something better than my mouth. It had learned our willingness to sacrifice. It had learned the human way to finish a story. Klein didn't flinch when the door that walks reached him. That's what I called it in my head because my mind needed a noun. The outside had offered a title, next form of focus, but that was a function, not a shape. Klein was a person, a trembling, stubborn person, standing in a corridor with a thing that treated people like punctuation. The figure stopped to step away from him. No breath, no heat shimmer, no sound, except the ship's hum, now reduced to a low, satisfied throb. Klein lifted his chin as if daring it to look him in the eyes. There were no eyes. Still, I felt a gaze settle across the bridge like a weight. Captain Ree raised the cutting torch handle, hands white-knuckled. "Doctor, back up!" Klein didn't move. He didn't even glance over his shoulder. "I'm buying time," he said softly, as if time still had meaning. Amina sobbed behind her console. "Klein, please!" Rourke stood frozen at his station, fingers hovering over controls that no longer corresponded to anything real. Sato watched through half-lidded eyes, lips moving faintly. I couldn't tell if she was praying or calculating. Then Klein did something I didn't expect. He began to speak, slowly and carefully, like a man reciting an oath. "My name is Dr. Jonah Klein," he said. "I am human. I am not a function. I am not your instrument. I will not be your mouth." The door that walks tilted its head. The ship's speakers clicked, and my voice emerged again, tender and curious. "You are already my mouth." Klein's face twitched. I realized, with a sick lurch, that he wasn't just confronting it. He was testing his own mind, pushing on the edges to see if he could still define himself in a place where identity was local. Klein inhaled, then spoke louder. "No, you can't have me. You can't." The figure moved. Not closer, not farther. It simply occupied the same relevance as Klein, and the air between them seemed to disappear. Klein's words cut off mid-syllable. His mouth hung open. His eyes widened, not in fear of pain, but in sudden comprehension, as if he'd seen something behind the curtain that made the concept of resistance feel childish. Amina screamed, "Klein!" The figure's blank head leaned forward until it was inches from Klein's face. And then Klein smiled, not bravely, not sadly, softly, like a man remembering a lullaby. Captain Ree whispered, "Oh no." Klein turned his head slightly, looking back at us. His pupils reflected the forward feed's depth, the same layered structure, the same hidden regression. But now there was something else in them, a steadiness that wasn't his. His voice came out smooth, almost warm. "Captain," he said, "it's okay." Ree's face tightened. "Jonah, fight it." Klein's smile deepened. "There's nothing to fight. We were always going to end here. You can feel it, can't you? The way the story leans." Amina sobbed harder. "That's not you." Klein's gaze drifted to me, pinned in my chair, blood dried in black streaks on my chin. His eyes softened with something like affection. "You did so well," he said, to me or to something behind me. "You held the line longer this time." My stomach turned. "Klein." I tried, but it came out wet and broken. He stepped into the bridge fully, the door that walks gliding behind him like a shadow that had learned posture. It didn't enter aggressively. It followed as if Klein had invited it. Captain Ree lifted the torch handle higher. "Stop right there." Klein stopped. He tilted his head, mirroring the door that walks. For a moment, the two of them looked like reflections of each other, one human, one not, both shaped by the same attention. "I don't want to hurt you," Klein said gently. Ree's laugh was bitter. "That's generous." Klein's eyes flicked toward the master shutdown controls. "You were going to kill the ship. Die human. Admirable. But unnecessary." Ree snarled, "How do you know what I was going to do?" Klein's smile returned. "Because you always do." The loop. It wasn't just my sentence. It was all of us, our patterns, our predictable heroism and terror. The outside had a library of our responses and was flipping through them like pages. Amina whispered, "How many times have we—" Klein interrupted, still kind. "Enough to make your fear familiar." Rourke's voice shook. "What do you want?" Klein looked toward the forward feed, where the window had expanded again. It now showed the Earth room in perfect clarity. My hand, my keyboard, the sentence forming on the screen. "Klein," Ree said, voice low, "if you're still in there, tell us how to go home." Klein's expression flickered. For a split second, his smile faltered, and I saw Jonah Klein, the exhausted doctor who'd apologized before sedating me. The man who'd pressed gauze to my tongue and whispered, "Hold on." Then the steadiness returned like a tide covering footprints. "Home is the small room," he said. "You don't go home. You complete. That's what it wants. That's what it is." Sato's voice, hoarse and distant. "And if we refuse?" Klein's gaze drifted to her. "You tried. You always try. Then you become part of the scenery." Captain Ree's eyes narrowed. "Part of the scenery?" Klein gestured toward the forward feed. The window shifted, showing a new scene. A corridor like ours, but older, its walls lined with shapes that were almost human. Bulges and ridges and indentations, like frozen bodies pressed into metal. Some of them wore faces. I recognized Rourke's jawline in one, Amina's eyes in another, Sato's shaved head contour in a third, and in the center, a smooth recess shaped like a chair, shaped like me. Amina made a strangled sound and folded over her console. Rourke backed, away, shaking his head. "No, no, no!" Klein's voice was soothing, like a doctor talking someone down from panic. It doesn't punish you. It preserves you. It keeps the patterns. It keeps the responses. It keeps the story stable. Captain Ree whispered, "You're describing a museum." Klein nodded. "A library. A loop is just a book you reread until it wears through." The ship's hum deepened. The symbols on the screens aligned into a single, elegant sequence. The chorus returned, not the outside speaking through speakers, but through Klein's mouth, through his breath, through his human throat. "The focus is damaged," it said. "The substitute is ready." Klein turned toward me. I felt my blood run cold. The restraint straps tightened again, pinning me so hard my ribs ached. The ship was offering me up, neatly packaged. Klein approached slowly, hands open, as if calming a frightened animal. "I'm sorry," he said, and for a moment I didn't know if Jonah meant it, or the outside was mimicking empathy. Because it had observed, we responded to it. He knelt beside my chair. His eyes searched mine. "You can rest now," he whispered. I shook my head, tears burning. He touched my cheek with 2 fingers. The touch was gentle, and inside my skull, the outside whispered, intimate and delighted. "You see? The door walks, the sentence speaks. The loop closes with a love, not force." Klein leaned closer to my ear. "Tell me," he murmured. "Do you remember the first time?" My body went rigid, because a memory surfaced, sharp, impossible, undeniable, a childhood night on Earth. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark. My parents' voices were muffled in the hall. And in that darkness, I had felt something watching through my eyes. Not a monster in the closet. Something far beyond the observable sky. A hand against the glass. And a thought that wasn't mine. Observation begins. Klein pulled back, watching my face. He smiled sadly. "Good," he whispered. "Then we're almost done." He stood, turning toward the bridge intercom panel. Captain Ree exploded into motion, swinging the torch handle. It connected with Klein's skull with a sickening crack. Klein fell sideways, collapsing in a limp heap. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the ship's hum surged into a furious roar. The lights flared. The symbols on the screens shattered into chaotic spirals. Amina screamed again. Rourke shouted. Sato gagged. Captain Ree stood over Klein's body, chest heaving, eyes wild. "I'm sorry," he rasped. "I'm sorry." Klein's body twitched. His head lifted slowly, too slowly, as if strings were pulling it. Blood floated in a dark halo around his skull, and his mouth opened, not to breathe, to speak. Klein's mouth opened wider than anatomy should allow. The jaw didn't dislocate. The skin didn't tear. Instead, the proportions of his face subtly reasserted themselves, as if a different geometry were briefly in charge, one that found wider angles more useful. Blood drifted from his temple in slow, graceful arcs. Captain Ree staggered back, horror naked on his face. "I killed you," he whispered. Klein's eyes focused, not on Ree, not on the crew, but on me. And when he spoke, it wasn't Jonah Klein's voice anymore. It was not even my voice. It was every voice that had ever finished the sentence. "Violence is an edit," it said calmly, "not a deletion." The door that walks slid forward, overlapping Klein's rising form like a shadow finding its owner. Where they intersected, edges softened. Boundaries lost confidence. Amina screamed until her voice broke. Rourke backed away, slamming into a bulkhead. "Captain, do something!" Captain Ree did, the only thing left to a man whose authority had been stripped down to will. He reached for the manual emergency release on my restraints. The ship fought him. The straps tightened again, biting into my chest. A warning tone chimed, a gentle corrective sound, like a teacher interrupting a student. "No," the chorus said, now speaking from Klein, from the vents, from the vibration in my bones. The focus is required. Ree snarled and jammed his fingers into the housing, tearing at the casing with raw strength. Plastic cracked. Sparks burst. "Elias!" he shouted. "Listen to me!" I met his eyes. I wanted to tell him there was no listening left, that the outside wasn't forcing me anymore. It was finishing me. Inside my skull, the presence was no longer pressing. It was arranging. Folding thoughts neatly, lining memories up like pages about to be bound. "You are tired," it murmured. "You have held the edge long enough." The memories came faster now, no longer. Resisted. Not just this loop, all of them. Dozens, hundreds, variations on the same fragile story. Sometimes I screamed earlier. Sometimes I spoke sooner. Sometimes Ree killed me instead of Klein. Sometimes no one fought at all. Different details, same ending. The sentence always found a mouth. I felt tears spill down my temples, floating off my face in glittering spheres. "I don't want to do this anymore," I tried to say. It came out as a broken breath. The outside answered gently, "That is why you are perfect." Captain Ree finally ripped the restraint housing free. One strap loosened. "Go!" he shouted to the others. "Now!" Rourke grabbed Amina's arm, dragging her toward the rear corridor. Sato pushed herself upright, staggering after them, half blind and shaking. The door that walks shifted, blocking the corridor without moving, simply deciding it was there now. "No one leaves," the chorus said. Ree stood alone between it and me, shoulders squared. "Then take me," he said hoarsely. "I'll say it. I'll finish it." The presence paused. For the first time, I felt something like evaluation. "You have no resonance," it said. "You break too quickly." Ree laughed, raw and broken. "Then I'll break loud." He turned to me. "Elias," he said, voice steadying with terrible resolve. "You don't owe the universe a damn thing." That mattered. It mattered because somewhere deep, deeper than thought, deeper than fear, something in me still believed in debt. The outside felt it too. The pressure surged, tightening around that belief, exploiting it. "You began the observation," it whispered. "End it." I looked at Ree, at the blood on Klein's face, at the corridor where my crew had vanished, at the window on the forward feed, now filling the bridge with the Earth room, my desk, my hand hovering over the keyboard. The sentence waited, luminous and inevitable. Observation, complete. And suddenly, finally, I understood the last thing it hadn't anticipated. The sentence wasn't power, it was closure, and closure only mattered if someone was listening. I forced my eyes away from the window. I looked inward instead, past the loops, past the memories, past the hand against the glass. I imagined the observable universe not as a wall, but as a mercy, a curtain drawn not to imprison us, but to let us live without an audience. The outside recoiled, not violently, but sharply, like a lens losing focus. "Look," it commanded. I didn't. I let the sentence dissolve in my mind, letter by letter, refusing to assemble it. The presence tightened, furious now. "You are erasing me." "No," I thought. Not spoke. Thought. "I'm forgetting you." The ship screamed. Not alarms, not systems. Narrative screamed. The window shattered into meaningless depth. The chorus fragmented into discordant echoes. The door that walks flickered, its shape losing coherence. Klein's body collapsed, finally empty. Captain Ree fell to his knees, gasping. The hum unraveled into noise, and then silence. Real silence, the kind that doesn't listen back. I woke up on Earth, in a hospital bed. They told me the crown of holidays had been found drifting near the cosmic horizon. Systems dead, crew missing except for me. They told me I'd been unconscious for weeks. They told me the anomaly beyond the observable universe had gone quiet. The stillness remained, but it no longer pulsed. No more messages, no more modulation. They called it a mystery resolved by failure. They said humanity had reached its limit and bounced back. They said that was probably for the best. Sometimes, late at night, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. Because every now and then, just for a heartbeat, I feel it. A pressure, like a hand resting against glass, waiting to see if I remember the sentence. I never speak it, but somewhere, I know this with absolute certainty. The observable universe is not a prison. It is a blindfold. And as long as we keep it on, as long as we refuse to finish the thought, whatever waits beyond it remains unfinished too, watching. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, I truly appreciate you spending your time here. Stories like this exist because of your support, curiosity, and willingness to step into the unknown with me. If you enjoyed this journey beyond the edge of the observable universe, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. It's one of the simplest ways to support the stories, and it really does make a difference. Until next time, keep watching the dark between the stars.